let's talk about what is the UFC show that I am most looking forward to out of any UFC show possibly for the year. I can't remember if there was if I was more excited to see a certain pay-per-view show. I guess maybe Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen, but from an overall just up and down live card, I don't know if I've been more excited than this one. UFC on Fox. So this is free television on Saturday. The main event is Benson Henderson and Nate Diaz for the lightweight championship. On the undercard, Mauricio Shogun Rua against Alexander Gustafsson in what I imagine to be some sort of eliminator fight at light heavyweight. And the return, and I don't know why I'm so excited, but I can't wait to see BJ Penn fight again against Rory McDonald, who is a young, or at least they're trying to market him as a young George St. Pierre. And Mike Quick Swick against Matt Brown. That's your Fox card. On the prelims, you have Michael Chiesa, you have Mike Easton and Rafael Assunção, Dennis Seaver against Nam Phan. That should be pretty fun. Ramsey Nijem and Joe Proctor, Eve Edwards and Jeremy Stevens, Cruikshank from the last not this season of Ultimate Fighter, but the previous one. He's fighting. And then on the Facebook card, you have Scott Jorgensen. So lots of really good stuff this weekend. Do you are you as excited as me, or am I just excited for no reason? What's the deal?
I'm excited because I think we both realize this is what the UFC has to treat the Fox shows as. Treat them as pay-per-views. Give us pay-per-view quality main events for free on Fox because this is the best time of the year to have a card. You got plenty of NFL marketing. Fox is really behind the brand, as apparently this week all their main programming on all their shows is themed. It's themed Fight Week, building up to Saturday. So all their shows have some sort of fight theme built into all their programming. I think they did something with the New Girl where they have a fight theme and stuff like that. So maybe there'll be a MMA theme on Glee this week. I don't know. But I'm very excited for this show. I think the 4 fights on the main card are fantastic. I think the FX card has some really exciting fights. I think Eve Edwards, Jeremy Stevens is a fight we finally get to see. We were supposed to see it on one of the FX shows back in Minnesota. The Bigfoot Silva what's his name? The Bigfoot Silva show again, but unfortunately Jeremy Stevens was in some weird legal issue where the state really wouldn't let Jeremy Stevens in. He was in prison in another state.
Wait, was that the Travis Brown fight?
Yeah, the Travis Brown show, and they were supposed to have this fight on there, but the Jeremy Stevens was in prison in another state, and the state kept working Dana White in terms of getting bail for Jeremy Stevens or something like that. So there's that. I think Dennis Stever and Nam Phan, like you said, should be fantastic. Mike Easton, Rafael Assunção is going to be a fantastic fight. Mike Easton is one of the really most exciting newcomers to the bantamweight division in the UFC. And it'll be interesting to see what Michael Chiesa can do in his first UFC fight since winning the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, definitely. What's funny is, when my kid talks about UFC, he knows the top guys, but he always asks me about Chiesa. And the reason he does is because he liked the stuff from last year's Ultimate Fighter with Uriah and Dominic, and so he saw every Chiesa fight. So he's always asking me about Chiesa. So I have to let him know that Chiesa is fighting finally. So let's go over the top 4 fights. Mike Swick, Matt Brown. What are your thoughts on this one, and who do you think is going to win?
I actually like this fight. I think this is brilliant marketing by, the UFC and Fox. As Mike Swick made his return back in the summer on Fox against DeMarcus Johnson, it had a stunning KO over DeMarcus Johnson. And now they face him up against Matt Brown, who's kind of on the comeback trail. Things that were looking like Matt Brown was about to be cut. But, he's living up to his nickname, the Immortal, and proving to live on in the UFC. He's had some big victories in his past couple fights. I think these two actually make a very interesting fight in terms of the styles they have. I think both guys are going to really let the hands go, and I think that's going to be just great for the viewer at home. But I think Mike Swick, he's, got the cage rust gone. I think he's overall, less battle worn down. He'd been away from the cage for 2 years, so I'm leaning Mike Swick, and I really hope he wins because, they'll throw Mike Swick on the next Fox show in some capacity.
So I think that this is going to be a pretty good opener. I think both guys know what's at stake here when it comes to, what the show means and how to get a show going and why they're the opener on this card. So I think it's going to be quick. I think they're going to let their hands go, like you said. But my prediction is that we're going to see the return of the Swickatine. Matt Brown's last 4 losses, I think all 4 came by the hands of submission. So I'm taking Swick with the Swickatine sometime late in the first round or early in the second round. So the fight that I mentioned that for whatever reason I'm super excited is mostly because of BJ Penn. He's one of the guys, from the era before, Fox and everything, the era where the UFC really took off. BJ Penn, I think, he's one of those guys who, because of the name of the Prodigy and because of how advanced he was at the point of when MMA was, coming out of that dark era, he's always seemed like such a special fighter. And, if there was a perfect guy for like a 160-pound weight class, like he'd be absolutely it. But, he's a little too small for 170 with some of those bigger guys, and he's doesn't like to get down to 155. So I think there's been, if things were a little bit different, he probably would be, he's going to be remembered as one of the best. But I think, just because of weight and because of size, he probably won't be remembered as good as he is. But he is fighting Rory MacDonald, and if you remember BJ Penn's greatest feud, he had 2 really great feuds with Matt Hughes and George St. Pierre, and I don't think that he likes St. Pierre all that much. I think he thinks St. Pierre's a cheater. I think he thinks St. Pierre's a greaser. And I think he thinks that if they were the same size, that he would beat St. Pierre. And I believe that he believes that he's a better fighter than St. Pierre. And here comes George St. Pierre Jr., a.k.a. Roy MacDonald. And the booking the fight hasn't actually been pushed like this, and I don't actually know why, but maybe they don't want they want Rory to stand on his own. But I kind of feel like the reason why these 2 guys are fighting is because Rory MacDonald is like George St. Pierre Jr.
Well, I mean, I think they're more so fighting because MacDonald wanted a test, and I think BJ Penn wanted one more fight, and I think this is the perfect matchup there. And I mean, I guess to your point, they're building him up as the next George St. Pierre. I don't know if he is or not yet. We'll wait and see. I mean, this fight was supposed to happen on the Toronto show that happened, but MacDonald had a nasty cut in training, so they had to cancel that fight. And I think had the fight taken place then, I would have leaned hugely in the favor of Rory MacDonald and being, very talented, but having the Father Time on his side. Here, I'm not going to so lean that way. I kind of am leaning the way of BJ Penn. I've heard lots of things from various sources that BJ is in fantastic shape, looking amazing, and I think a motivated BJ Penn is a scary BJ Penn. So I would lean with BJ Penn, and I think if he wins, it's actually a good thing for the show. This is one of the rare times where I go with the veteran over the rookie.
Now, in their first fight, there was a lot of talk about this VADA drug testing, and I'm not quite sure that this is exactly what happened, but I think what happened is Penn immediately signed up for the VADA drug testing without consulting with MacDonald and his camp, and thus McDonald and his camp basically had to say yes, or else they looked like drug abusers. So that could be a little bit of you know, a little bit of warfare there for BJ, a little bit of mind games in a sense. His last two fights actually, not very impressive on his end. You know, the draw to John Fitch. I think most people had it scored for Fitch, even though it came out as a draw, and he lost to Nick Diaz in a way that made you want to see BJ Penn retire, and he actually retired in the cage. But he's back, and I'm leaning like you a little bit in that the one time that McDonald had lost was when he was just, just Carlos Condit just took him to the I think was it the third round when Condit got him?
Yes, it was the dying seconds of the last round.
Yeah, and you know he was in control for the first two rounds, and then Condit just outlasted him and just bum rushed him at the end there. And I can see this fight going the same way. Now, here's the problem with that. Carlos Condit is always in amazing shape. Is BJ Penn in amazing shape? Now, you say that you've heard that he is. I've never really watched a BJ Penn fight and thought, wow, that guy has a gas tank. That's the problem here for me. I think from a strength perspective, from a hands perspective, I think BJ Penn has the power to put Roy McDonald away. Does he have the gas tank to do the job, though? I think that's really going to be the that's really going to be the telling sign. Come the third round, does BJ Penn have enough to put this guy away? Because I don't expect, if this fight goes the way that I think it goes, and that it's going to be, lots of back and forth, most of it on the feet. Who's going to be the stronger guy in the third round? And I think that guy's going to win it. I'm going to go with BJ. I think the hands are a little bit better. And he always has the jiu-jitsu stuff to pull out if necessary, if he needs to steal around or something, or if he needs to, he's got it, though he doesn't use it all that much. I'm still going to lean BJ. I think the veteran guy, he knows what it takes. This would be a fantastic, icing on the top of the cake of his career to win on live television. He's an absolute superstar, and so I'm going to have him. I'm taking him here, but I think it's a close fight. I actually think it's pretty much a pick'em fight, but I'm leaning BJ. So Shogun against Alexander Gustafsson. I think we are going to learn a lot about Mr. Gustafsson in this fight. Does he have what it takes to beat Shogun?
You know what? I honestly think he does. I think he's a problem matchup for anyone. I mean, he's so tall, he's so lanky, and plus he has good skill. I mean, he has power in his hands, and I mean, if it goes to the ground, I think he can definitely mix it up there very successfly. I think the thing that we have kind of seen recently out of Shogun is, Shogun back in Pride was, a killer and, would just end your life. But his past couple fights in the UFC is more of just rock'em sock'em robots, blood and guts. And that's not really the mentality that we're used to seeing from Shogun instead of, a tactical guy that would set up the knockout. Instead, now he's just in these blood and guts back and forth fights. And I think that is something that's definitely taken its toll on Shogun. Obviously the Henderson fight, which is, a classic and one of the greatest, maybe the greatest of all time. And then in the last Fox show, he went toe-to-toe for a very long time with Brandon Vera, which, a lot of people are like, I can't believe Brandon Vera's lasting this long with Shogun. I think Gustafsson's a perfect matchup for him. I think if Gustafsson wins, he really should be considered the number one contender, or at least potentially meet the winner of Henderson, Machida, however that plays out, because I think Gustafsson is a guy that they are really marketing. They've been doing a lot of stuff with him on the Fuel shows they have, and they've been throwing him on YouTube. I think as well, the country he's from, Sweden, is actually an MMA hotbed for a country. And I think he wins there. Wherever his next fight would be has to be in Sweden, because that's just going to be fantastic. Because the last time he fought in Sweden, which was against Thiago Silva in the UFC, I mean, that place was sold out. It was just an amazing atmosphere. So I think honestly, you can tell I am leaning Gustafsson here. I'm going to be a little nervous because you never know what Shogun you're going to get. Even if you get Shogun hurt, you actually have to have a ref come in there and pull you off of him. Until that's the only way you're going to know the fight's over, because you can never count Shogun out. So I am leaning Gustafsson. Here's where I think the youth beats the experience of all the fights on this matchup, and I'm actually really excited for this fight, maybe more so than any fight on the main card.
We are in agreement on these first three fights, and that's kind of scary. I agree with you. I don't even really have anything else to add. I mean, my whole thing was about Shogun just using his face as a heavy bag and just throwing back. Like at some point, that's gonna stop working, and working for him and against him. But I think it's Gustafsson's time. He could get in a slugfest though, and you never know what's going to happen. Shogun, as we saw against Forrest Griffin not too long ago, still has dynamite in his hands, and it could happen. But I am leaning towards Gustafsson as well. So we get to the main event. I think we're going to split on this one. That's my guess. But Benson Henderson, the champion, who comes off of beating Frankie Edgar twice in a row. Even though I thought he lost the last fight. Do you remember who you had in the last Frankie Edgar fight?
I actually did not get that pay-per-view. I was out that night, and there was not too much of an interest for me because I figured it'd be the same style of fight that happened in Japan, and I kind of was after looking back on it. But I didn't see any real difference, and I'm kind of happy that Benson Henderson remained champion. I think Frankie Edgar is now branching off and going to be in an exciting fight in the new year with Jose Aldo.
Yeah, that's going to be dynamite. I had Frankie Edgar winning. And if you're just going by sort of a round-by-round thing, I didn't really think it was that close, though, it was a close fight overall, but just from a sort of a round-by-round scoring, I didn't think it was that close. But Benson Henderson against Nate Diaz, and both guys they're just hot. Like from a win-loss perspective, Nate's won 3 in a row. I think Benson's won 5 in a row. I think it's like the perfect television main event. Now, neither guy is as known as maybe like a Rashad Evans was on that second Fox show, but really. It's a title fight. They can sell it as a title fight. A Diaz is involved, and I think it's just like the perfect main event for what should be a super exciting show. Now, both guys have fought, on their feet more or less, in recently, I think Diaz got a submission on Jim Miller in his last fight, and he actually submitted Takanori Gomi. But his strategy is really to just hang out, just to use his long reach, just to parry guys and just overwhelm them with punches, and Benson's using leg kicks, and he just those humongous thighs that he has, and so who breaks first, who goes to the ground? Who decides, what they're going to do? How does this fight differ, from just your normal stand-up kickboxing fight?
If it goes to the ground, if anyone's going to dictate it there, I would think Nate Diaz would want the fight there. While Ben Henderson definitely has a nasty, nasty guillotine, I think overall the jiu-jitsu of Nate Diaz is just a little bit better than what Ben Henderson has to offer. I think the question would be, will Ben Henderson tap? Because there's been times in fights, obviously the first Cerrone fight, and then the Pettis fight in the WEC. which now seems years ago, he should have tapped. He should have tapped at least in both those fights, and he didn't. He showed the intestinal fortitude and the will of the champion back then to not and keep persevering. I don't know if Nate can make him tap, but Nate's going to damn sure try. I mean, he did make Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz did make Jim Miller tap, which I did was something I didn't know was possible, but that happened on one of the last Fox shows, or the Fox show that took place in the early part of the summer. So I think that's going to be interesting. I think if this fight's on its feet, it's actually going to be trouble for Nate Diaz. I think Ben Henderson's stand-up is just way too much, too crisp. So if it's a stand-up fight, I lean Ben Henderson. If it goes to the ground, I would give Diaz a slight edge. But overall, I'm going to pick Ben Henderson here by decision. And if it's decision, hopefully it's not too controversial and we don't have one of those Strikeforce CBS moments.
Yes, we do not want to see Mayhem Miller come into the ring and into the cage and challenge guys and everyone just beat him up. We don't want to see that. I think it's going to go a very similar way, but I think Diaz's his hands are going to be problematic for Benson. Now, again, Benson Henderson's striking is a little bit more varied, so it's not as predictable, whereas Nate Diaz's striking is entirely predictable. But Nate Diaz seems so confident with his boxing these days, and that's where I think he is going to control the fight, is with the boxing. And he seems very willing to let the other fighter dictate where things go. Like he's very confident in his boxing. He'll sit there and throw punches and he'll talk trash and everything. And then he'll react to what the other guy does. So that's sort of why I was interested in thinking, who takes it from just a sort of a kickboxing match. Because that's effectively what the Benson Henderson and Frankie Edgar fights were, save for the takedowns. It was, it was a wrestling / kickboxing match. And I think I just wonder who's going to break their strategy first in this one. And if neither guy does, it could be a very close fight. I'm taking Nate by decision. I think he's going to do enough. I think Frankie Edgar had Benson in the last fight. I think Benson lost that fight. I think Nate Diaz is going to win this fight. And I think Nate Diaz as a champion may actually be a little bit of a draw.
Oh, it would be fantastic. Let's be real. This is if any of the fights is a head versus heart. I mean, my head says Ben Henderson. My heart says Nate Diaz. I would love to see Nate Diaz become a UFC lightweight champion, because not only does I think it's exciting for the reasons you're saying it would be, but I mean, it means Nate can finally, and I guess a lot of people would say, well, he already has, but I'd say finally get past the shadow of being Nick's baby brother. And, he does something Nick hasn't done yet in the UFC, and that's become a champion.
Now, if Nate wins this fight, what kind of gibberish is he going to speak on the microphone in that post-fight interview with Joe Rogan?
Also, I know he's going to thank Cesar Gracie and say that Gilbert Melendez is one of the best lightweights in the world.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I know he's going to say, if anyone's going to speak gibberish, it should be Nick. But Nate is actually pretty normal when he talks, but all we know is Nate Diaz, he's going to thank Cesar Gracie, Gilbert Melendez. That's about it.
And Nate Diaz as champion will not face Gilbert Melendez ever. So that'll be something else too. And Dana White, the first thing he'll say is, we have Gilbert and we want him to fight Nate, and they're going to say no, and Dana's going to say yes. That will be kind of weird. But yeah, I'm dying for it. I want to see Nate Diaz as a champion. I want to see Nick Diaz's baby brother as a champion. Who was the guy? Was it Carl Parisian who in the Ultimate Fighter who came in and Nate was like challenging him to fight like right then and there?
Yes, it was Carl the Heat Parisian, because Carl and Nick had an amazing fight. So the Parisians and the Diazes, they do not get along.
Yeah, so that would be quite amazing. So there you have it. UFC on Fox
Carl
this weekend.
Parisian?
What? Say that again.
I think they're going to bring back Carl Parisian to be the number one contender.
And so how about a tag team match? Caro and Manny Gamburian against the Diaz brothers.
Well, maybe on the Japanese New Year's show, but you'd have to have Dana would have to have an early New Year's and a lot of eggnog at Christmas to even consider.
Okay, so there you go, UFC on Fox this weekend. What an amazing night if you are a boxing fan and an MMA fan. You have the MMA show that you don't have to pay for, and when that's done, it leads right into the main event fight. I imagine it'll probably be done by the time that most of the pre-fight or the undercard stuff on the boxing show is over. So it should be a ton of fun. I can't wait. So not there hasn't been too many of these Saturday nights where I'm like, wow, like there's so much good stuff on.
Well, I think UFC is getting to the point again, starting in the new year, where starting at the end of 2012, going into the new year, where we're going to have that feeling more often. Because when you look at the first three cards that the UFC is presenting in 2013, they have an FX show that has title implications in the middleweight division as Vitor Belfort and Michael Bisping. Have you seen the next UFC on Fox show?
Is it? It's the small guys, right?
Yeah, the main event is Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson defending against John Dodson, but you have Donald Cerrone and Anthony Pettis on that show.
Yeah, that's great.
An outstanding fight. And then I think the third fight that they will for sure put on there is Glover Teixeira and Quentin Rampage Jackson.
I fear for Rampage a little bit in that fight.
I do as well, but I think that's going to be what the people want to see. So that's perfect matchmaking there. As well, the prelims have Clay Guida and Hatsuyoki, and it should be an awesome featherweight bout.
And if they could get out of that Strikeforce contract, Ronda Rousey would even out that card really well.
I don't know if she'll fight right away. I think they're going to have that January 12th show, and then that's going to be about it. And maybe the next Fox show in the summer, we have Ronda.
Well, if you went by the schedule, she probably should be fighting in December, but just because they're tied up, that would be her sort of normal pattern of fights. So that January show would have done well, but they just can't get out of that contract, I guess, from what I've been reading. But yeah, so.
I think they will. I think their lawyers will do enough. The way it just seems Strikeforce is about to be, they're just slowly lowering the coffin at this moment. I guess if you're going to have Ronda, I don't know if you have her on Fox. Wouldn't you want to have her in pay-per-view?
It depends if you think if you think people will pay to watch her fight.
I honestly really do.
I think putting her on television would definitely be a test. I think, if you think of, if you sort of think of normal booking in the sense of how pro wrestling does it, you have the TV show that builds to the pay-per-view. Now, if you were to put, let's say Ronda fights Miesha Tate, which we've already seen, right? We saw that at Strikeforce. Let's just say that that's her next fight. And whoever the next contender is going to be for Ronda also fights somebody on that card. If Ronda gets over, I think then you'd go, okay, now we have people who are bought in, and now she can, maybe they'll pay for her in the next fight. You're basically putting her on pay-per-view with only super diehard MMA fans truly knowing who she is and hoping that the ESPN stuff that she got earlier this year would be enough for the casual the casual pay-per-view buyers to buy. I think best case scenario would be to build her up through television because you could see her as the real deal and then pull her away and go, okay, if you want to see her again, you got to pay. But who knows? That all that stuff is I don't think Dana White and Joe Silva can act. I think they can try to do stuff like that, but because there's so many stinking injuries and so many changes and things of that nature out of their control, that it probably doesn't exactly happen the way they want. But I think I did read somewhere that Dana White did say that he would like to put her on pay-per-view first. So you may be absolutely right.
As I usually am on the show.